Okay, welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We are going to begin our professional development. Today's topic is going to cover culturally responsive education. So just a quick rundown of our agenda here. We are going to look at, just do a quick welcome and a check-in. And then we're going to go ahead and look at understanding culturally responsive education, just getting a little bit of background knowledge on it and really what is it, right? When it breaks down to it, what really is culturally responsive education and teaching. Then we're going to look at addressing the first four competencies and really just breaking down what encompasses a culturally responsive classroom and school. From there, we will be able to have a quick break. We will then resume with the last four competencies and then any final thoughts and next steps, right? Because we want to make sure we are continuing to expand and grow our tool belt. Are there any questions? Wonderful, thank you so much. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So how much do you already know about culturally responsive education? So I believe on your Pear Deck, on there it says there is a green little portion that says you may answer the question. Do you see that there? So if you can please go ahead and answer that question. Kimberly, I know you just joined us right now. If you would like to follow along with the presentation here, you can go to joinpd.com and then you can enter this code here. Just give a few moments for everyone to answer that. Okay, so as I see here, you know, some of us are already well versed in culturally responsive education, which is wonderful. So I'm hoping that maybe you're able to take maybe just a little something, something new that you can always add to your tool belt there. So let's go ahead and let's continue. So what exactly is culturally responsive education? Really, it breaks down to these four components here. It's understanding the values and traditions of our students. It means sharing diverse perspectives. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's sharing diverse perspectives, validating cultural identity, and modifying for different communication styles. So again, making sure that our students are feeling like they are a part of the community. I think that is the key word there, is making sure that students feel that they are a part of that classroom and that school community. So making sure that they are all feel welcome and that they are able to see themselves represented within our classrooms and within our schools. Here we have just a quick diagram, and I really like this one here because this helps us to identify and break down our cultural identity, right? We begin with our nationality, which breaks into our race, our subcontents here, and then really this is what molds us. This is what makes us who we are. And understanding all of these components with our students is really key so that we are able to make those authentic connections with them. Down at the bottom there, ladies, you do not have to click on that right now, but I do have an added resource there for you that you may have access to so that you may explore at your leisure. So why is it relevant to student learning? Why is it important that I create this culturally responsive classroom? Culture refers to the customs, languages, and beliefs and achievements of a group of people. So the culture that many students experience at home and in their communities is not always represented in school. Again, making sure that our students are making those connections, making sure that they feel they are welcome and they are part of our community is important. I have here with you a video that I would like to share with you. And this is from the perspective of about an 8 or 9-year-old boy and how he feels that complete disconnect from home to school, right? He does not feel like he is a part of here. And this for me, when I first saw this video, was such an eye opener as to, wow, am I taking the time to make the connection? Am I taking the time to really get to know each and every one of my babies? So let me just go ahead and share this video with you.
If she only knew. If she only knew that I had to get my little brother up and ready for school this morning, she wouldn't have fussed at me for being a few minutes late. If she only knew that I didn't get to eat supper last night, she wouldn't have taken the extra cereal that Chris gave me at breakfast. She said, only one cereal for each student. That's the rule at this school. If she only knew that I had to watch my little brother last night while my mama was at the park with her friends, she wouldn't have punished me for not getting my homework done. If she only knew that I like to make stuff during science class, she would have let us make rockets like Miss Bagan's class. Instead, we read about rockets from a book. If she only knew that her rules were as long as the lines at the city pool, she would make a shorter list that we could remember. If she only knew that my daddy left me and my mama when I was 2, she would stop telling me that she was going to call my daddy for a conference. If she only knew that I get really upset when Leonard talks about my mama, her biggest rule would be no talking about other people's mamas. If she only knew how much I love to draw, she would make me the class poster maker. Instead, she doesn't let me because my handwriting isn't so great. If she only knew that I need to talk if I'm going to learn, she wouldn't send me to the principal's office so much. She says my talking is disruptive in the classroom. She's the only person talking. In my opinion, that's disruption. If she only knew when she gets mad and screams at the class, it scares me. Last year, Miss Dooley never raised her voice at me. Miss Dooley was as quiet as a crook after midnight. When Miss Dooley talked, kids listened. If she only knew that some of the boys are trying to get me to join their gang, she would help me say no. If she only knew how much I like to run, she would have told me about last week's track team sign up. If she only knew how much I needed my mentor here at school, she would let me see him more. He thinks I'm cool. If she only knew I know stuff that she doesn't know. I know where to get bus tokens. I know what time the city bus passes the school. I know the best place to buy a pop. I know what time the sprinklers come on at the park. I know what it means to be dissed. I know how to live without electricity. I know how to entertain an entire room of people with my personality and humor. I know what churches have the best rummage sales. I know how to stay safe in my neighborhood. I know how to keep my clothes from being stolen at the laundromat. I know a lot more than she thinks I do.
Pretty powerful, huh? Again, this right here brings me back to the point of really getting to understand and know our students one-on-one, getting to know who they are besides just the little bodies in our classrooms, because they are more than students, right? They are brothers, sisters, they are sons, and they come in with a wealth of background experiences and knowledge that we really need to take into consideration when we are going through their curriculum and when we are teaching these little people. So let's dive really into the curriculum that we're going to be looking at here. We are going to be looking at 8 competencies that help to make up a culturally responsive teaching. We are going to look at each one of them a little bit more in depth, and I will provide you with additional resources or applications that you may be able to use within your classroom. Down at the bottom here, you can see that there is a link there. Again, you do not need to click on it now, but it is there so that you may further explore it on your own. Okay, let's begin by looking at competency number 1. And this is looking at our own cultural lens. Culturally responsive educators routinely reflect on their own life experiences and membership in various identity groups and ask themselves how these factors influence their beliefs and actions. Um, Biases are a part of us. Whether we like to acknowledge them or not, we are conditioned with biases. And being able to identify those biases and acknowledge them is the first step to building a culturally responsive classroom. Because as educators, whether we like to address it or not, we do have those biases. So making sure that we're aware of them and knowing how we can filter our lens and further expand our lens is a big part of creating that classroom environment. I really appreciate this graphic here because it allows me to see how really we take in such a vast, we take in such a vast backgrounds and just experiences from the world. And as we further get them closer to us, we start to diminish them by really just filtering them out to what is applicable to us or what is most convenient for us. So looking at it through a cultural lens, expanding our cultural lens. So here I have for you just a few classroom applications on how you can incorporate what we call the three lenses for academic empathy. Empathy being the key word here. When we are building a classroom community, we want to make sure that we are teaching our students how to empathize with each other. We have three here. One would be historical, pushing students outside the present to understand people living in other times, right? Making sure that they're able to see further than just the now and what's happening. Cultural, making sure that we're engaging with contemporary culture outside of the students' experiences and challenging their own cultural biases. That is important for us to understand that just like us, our students also come with their own biases that have been integrated into them, because of their background, their family, their life experiences. And getting them to understand and see outside of their own culture is huge in building that classroom community. And then lastly, we have social. These are the building activities in which students learn to listen to one another's perspectives. These would be those class building activities, those community building activities. So making sure that you are incorporating those within the classroom is huge in building that classroom family. Okay. Let's look at competency number 2 right here. So recognizing and redress the bias. So understanding that there is a difference between bias at the personal level and then bias at the institutional and the systematic level. Okay. So again, culturally responsive education is further than just the classroom. It is a culture and a climate that needs to be built within the school site, really within our educational system. But looking at it from just our school side, here is just a short video that I would like to share with you on how we can address biases and how we can address them within our own works, within our work environment.
We all have our biases, the set of assumptions that we make and the things we don't notice about people's race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, appearance, and other traits. They come from the part of our mind that jumps to conclusions that we might not even be aware that we have.
I really can't tell you the number of times people assumed I was the receptionist when I was an executive at the company.
That kind of bias gets in the way of good collaboration, performance, and decision-making.
It creates an invisible tax of resentment and frustration. The more frustrated we are, the more silent we are likely to be. And the more silent we are, the less we may be able to do our best work. The good news, though, is bias is not inevitable. So here's how to disrupt bias in 3 steps. The first step is to create a shared vocabulary. Sometimes bias shows up in big, embarrassing gaffes, but more often it comes out in the little words and phrases we choose, which are packed with assumptions. In meetings especially, these often go unnoticed, or even worse, people notice, but don't know what to say. That's why we recommend coming up with a shared word or phrase that everyone agrees to use to disrupt bias, attitudes, or behaviors. Examples teams are using are bias alert, stoplight, or even throwing up a peace sign.
Leaders often ask us to give them the right words, but the best words are the ones your team will actually say, not the ones that leaders impose. So talk to your team. My very favorite is the one that you recommended, Trier, purple flag. When someone says or does something biased, we'll say purple flag, and maybe we'll even wave a purple flag. It's not a red flag, it's a friendly purple flag.
It helps us become more aware of our blind spots.
Purple flag.
Purple flag. Thanks for pointing that out. I've been noticing lately I use a lot of sight metaphors that often portray disabilities like being visually impaired in negative ways, but I'm committed to doing better and working on it.
I am too. Another great shared vocabulary trick is to ask members of your team to respond to bias with an I statement. An I statement invites the other person in to understand things from your perspective rather than calling them out. Like, I don't think you're going to take me seriously when you're calling me honey, or I don't think you meant that the way that it sounded. Usually, when people's biases are pointed out to them clearly and compassionately, they apologize and correct things going forward. Usually, but not always.
That brings us to the second step. Create a shared norm for how to respond when your bias is pointed out.
When my bias is flagged, I can only be glad that I'm learning something new if I can move past the shame. I hate the idea that I've harmed someone. And when I feel ashamed, I rarely respond well. So it's really helpful to have that shared norm so that I know what to say in those moments.
We recommend you start with, thank you for pointing that out. It took courage for that person to disrupt the bias. So it's important to acknowledge that. Then there are two choices on what to say next. One, I get it, or two, I don't get it. Could you explain more after the meeting?
The other day, you and I were recording a podcast, and I said HR serves three masters, and you waved the purple flag. I knew what I had done wrong. Why was I using a slavery metaphor? We hit pause, I thanked you, and we re-recorded. It was no big deal. The thing I love about the purple flag is how efficient it is.
Flagging the bias didn't prevent us from getting the work done. In fact, it helps us work together more honestly.
It's even harder when I don't know what I did wrong. Once I asked someone out to lunch. Out came the purple flag. I had no idea why. So I was relieved to know what to say next. Thank you for pointing it out, but I don't get it. Could we talk after the meeting? Afterwards, the person reminded me that they were fasting for Ramadan. It instantly made sense to me, and I discovered something that I could be more aware of. But to get to awareness, I had to move through shame. It was hard to say, I don't get it. The shared norm helped me listen and learn rather than getting defensive. The fact that there was a norm at all reassured me that other people are making similar kinds of mistakes and that we're all learning together.
Disrupting bias may start off feeling uncomfortable, but with time and consistency, we can build the stamina we need to push through it. When it becomes routine for us to notice our biases, all of a sudden they feel less threatening. It's hard to break bias habits, yet we can change the pattern with consistent effort.
We've got to be patient with ourselves and with others.
Patient and also persistent.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our last step. Once a team has come up with a shared vocabulary and agrees on the shared norm for how to respond, the team should commit to disrupting bias at least once in every meeting.
If bias isn't flagged in a meeting, it doesn't mean there wasn't any bias. It just means either nobody noticed or nobody knew what to say. When we are silent about bias, we reinforce it. And it can't be just the targets of bias who point it out. Observers and leaders have got to speak up. We all have a responsibility.
By making a practice of disrupting bias quickly and kindly, we prevent it from metastasizing into something worse, like prejudice, bullying, discrimination, or harassment.
Bias disruptors, a shared vocabulary, a shared norm, and a shared commitment ensure that we notice and learn from the mistakes that we are all making so that we can work better together.
When we collaborate, we use our full capacity as humans to get more done collectively than we could ever dream of accomplishing as individuals. So let's stop letting bias get in the way.
Something that the ladies mentioned here that is really powerful is that addressing bias when we first begin can be very uncomfortable. But I think that we have to be willing to make ourselves a little uncomfortable so that we can disrupt some of these, what are now common norms, in order for us to progress and move forward. And the reason that I bring this up here is because we want to make sure that just like we are creating a safe space and a space that feels safe and engaging for our students in a space where they feel like they belong, we want to make sure that we are also a part of that, that we have that within our own workspace, right? We want to make sure that we feel safe and validated. And so addressing this within our workplace and having that conversation, right? Having that difficult conversation of, hey, how are we going to address this when it does happen? And having that common terminology. I know that out of my old side, and I'm sure Tanya can attest to this, we would have what we would call a foul sign. We would call a foul. So if whenever there was a personal foul, whenever one of us felt that there was something that was said or done, knowing or unknowingly, which most of the time was unknowingly, that just didn't sit well or came across as a bias, we would call a foul. And then we would be able to talk about it, really discuss it, and then correct it. So having that common terminology within your workplace and being able to address it and redress it. And not only that, but we want to make sure that we're able to teach our students how to do this as well. We want to make sure that they have the proper words, the terminology, so that when they feel hurt or they feel like one of their friends has done them wrong, that they are able to address the problem with words and are able to correct it and address it. So let's consider different viewpoints regarding the topic of bias. What I would like for you ladies to do here is, if you please, if you could type just your thoughts on what your point of view is, and then what you think another person's point of view might be in regards to biases. So if I could just have you jot just a few ideas here, what are your points? What is your point of view on addressing it within the workplace? And then another person's point of view. Hope that makes sense. And I believe you're able to type on there where it says text. Wonderful, thank you. And just so that you know, these come in completely anonymous on here. So all I see is the text. I don't see who's typing anything. So let me just read some of the ones we have here. From my point of view here, it says recognizing biases it means that you are intentional about it. That is very true, making sure that we are intentional in addressing them and correcting them. I also see here, for another point of view, people may feel like they aren't being, people feel like they aren't going to be told what to do, or they don't struggle with biases. That is very true. Accepting the fact that we all have these biases and addressing them can sometimes be more difficult on our part, right? Making sure that we are being true to ourselves and understanding that, hey, you know what, I do have these, but I want to fix them. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, ladies, so much for your responses there. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next slide. Okay, so let's look here at competency number 3, which is to draw on students' culture to shape the curriculum and instruction. So this is the belief that students' cultural background and their existing background and knowledge can help bridge new learning. Culturally responsive educators use cultural scaffolding to provide links between new academic concepts and students' background knowledge. Again, this is taking our students' background knowledge and their prior experiences and bringing those into the classroom. We want to make sure that we are providing mirrors that reflect our students so that they are able to see themselves within the curriculum that we are presenting. And we also want to make sure that we are giving them windows. We want to make sure that we are creating windows for them so that they can see themselves in the future as well. On here, I have included for you a couple of resources to help you build a more culturally responsive library. There are links here to how to use a rubric to help you evaluate whether the book is culturally responsive or not. And there is also a list here of books that have already been categorized in this category here. And here are two of my favorites, Playing El Juego de la Lotería and The Last Stop on Market Street. I highly recommend these books. Competency number 4 here is bringing real world issues into the classroom. So culturally responsive educators address the so what, right? So what and so what? Why do I need to learn this? What is the point of me knowing this here? This is the factor of instruction of helping students to see how the knowledge and skills that they are learning in school are valuable to their lives, their families, and their communities. We want to make sure that we are integrating project-based learning during this time into the curriculum so that students are able to make these real world connections. We want to make sure that we start this early on. We want to make sure that students are able to make real world connections with classroom connections. We want to stop this teaching in isolation. This is a lot of the time why we have a lot of disconnect with our students and they don't know how to use what we've taught them outside of our grade level or outside of the classroom because we never made that real world connection for them. So therefore it is not relevant to them if it is not within that setting. So making those connections for them so that they can take those skills outside of the classroom and apply them is key. Here are a couple of questions that you can practice with your students implementing in your lessons or within your curriculum so that they can start to make those real world connections. What does this material have to do with your lives? So taking the time to brainstorm with students, right? Looking at it and say, okay, how can we connect what we're going to learn about with our lives? Does this knowledge connect to an issue you care about? So making sure we are making it relevant to our students. We want to make sure, again, that we are tugging at their interests and their things that really are, that they care deeply about so that they can make those connections. And then 3, how can we use this information to take action? And this one right here for me it's crucial because we want to make sure not only are we equipping students with these critical thinking skills, but that we are building 21st century citizens that are going to be able to go out into the community and be able to be problem solvers, right? They can have those critical thinking skills of, yes, there are issues happening. What can I do to try to solve these, or what solutions can I bring forth to the table? So how are these things connected? So I have just here for you a quick activity, if you wouldn't mind helping me with this right here. And this is thinking of a current unit that you're already teaching. So let's take adaptations, okay? Let's take the topic of adaptations. What real world connection or application can we integrate? If I can have you ladies just take a moment to type in some real world connections and just jot down some ideas of how we can apply this for our students and how we can explain to them how this is a real world connection. So again, the topic is going to be adaptations. And then how can we make a real world connection to adaptations? Okay, I'm going to start reading just some of the responses that I have on here. And then some of them that I have on here is they help me to understand how I can adapt to new environments. They help me to understand and adapt to new people and experiences. So again, and then here we also have, of course, adaptations help me to connect how animals adapt to their surroundings. So making sure that students are able to see that we can take this unit of study here and further it even more by making real life connections to them. And again, right, it could be maybe they are moving schools or going into a new grade level. And how we can adapt to those different experiences and those different situations. So again, just making sure that we're making those real life connections for students and helping them to understand that what we are learning here is not just in isolation, but they can take this knowledge and also apply it in real life. Wonderful. We have made it through the first part of our PD. Yay! Wonderful. So we are going to go ahead and we are going to take a 5-minute break so we can stretch and use the restroom. Thank you, ladies, so much. And I will be back with you in a minute.